Okay, yippee-ki-yay, vampire lovers. This is Buffy Boys, your weekly review of Buffy the Vampire Slayer from a queer and feminist perspective, with two hosts, one of whom is me, Joel, and the other of which is you, and your name is...
Brian. Hi, how's it going? How you getting on?
Good. I'm all smooth over here, all smooth conversationally.
Sure.
No, I'm doing pretty well. I'm excited about this episode, which we will be reviewing today, which is School Heart, and it was written and directed by...
Do you ever wonder about what our neighbours must think about us? Because we do this by the window, and they must be able to see us sometimes just talking at each other into our microphones. But if they knew that we had 100,000 followers, they'd be pretty impressed.
I feel like our neighbours see us do a lot of strange things through these windows. Like, we do Dungeons and Dragons here. I shout at the TV when I'm playing video games a lot. Occasionally, I know a few weeks ago I really got into retro covers of modern songs. So I was walking around the apartment singing to myself quite a bit.
I think I worry about them seeing the most is me picking up Booker and line kinging him. Which I do quite often.
Quite a bit, yeah. So I will tell you that without fail, every single time I'm in this apartment by myself, which isn't very often because you do work from home, I do Tom Cruise and I slide into the room.
Of course you do. So this episode was directed by John T. Kretschner, and the story is by David Greenwalt and Joss Whedon, and the teleplay is by David Greenwalt. And I was having to think about this. I think the idea there is that essentially Joss Whedon had a big part in coming up with the characters and the storyline generally. But the person who actually wrote the words was David Greenwalt, who obviously is the guy who did a lot of Angel.
Yeah.
And the director also directed 14 episodes of Veronica Mars.
Oh, very cool.
He directed The Harvest for Buffy, and he also directed 2 episodes of DS9.
Do you know which episode?
I didn't bother.
That's sorry. Okay, no worries. I'll look up later in my...
Oh, sorry, and it was first aired on September 29th, 1997.
Again, quite soon after my birthday.
That's going to happen for a little bit now.
I know, yeah.
You know?
I find it's quite interesting because I usually think there was more rhyme or reason to, who got credited in the opening credits as special guest appearance by, who got credited as teleplay and all this kind of stuff. And it turns out there actually isn't any structure to it so much as this negotiation.
It absolutely is, yeah.
It's very much like, well, I feel I did more of this, so I'm going to be also featuring, and it's all part of aging stuff. But
yeah, I think there's the only thing that is there is that essentially with the Writers Guild in America and the Directors Guild, there has to be a director's credit and a writer's credit for movies, I believe, and they have very strict regulations about who can get it. So Bryan Singer didn't do much of Bohemian Rhapsody in the end, but they had to give him the directing credit. And there was a movie released recently, a kids movie, about a park that a girl retreats to in her brain because her mother has cancer, and it had no director.
I didn't know that Bohemian Rhapsody had a director.
It was Bryan Singer. He's a shithead.
No, but I just mean when you actually watch the film, it looks like it was assembled by an algorithm.
It's such a bad movie.
But it's interesting because it's something that you come up against very much in genre TV, because things like Star Trek very much solicited scripts from people. Doctor Who famously, it was like, who's on rotation this week, you're going to just write the script for this episode. It was like a very much a mechanical utility job. So this concept of the auteur, is really just not a thing in genre fiction very often. So yeah, it's always interesting to me when you have something where Joss Whedon has obviously had a very heavy hand in kind of creating the story, and someone else has written the words. It's actually, I've recently finally committed and gotten very much into understanding, for my sins, Buffy comics, and there's the whole mess that's
How have they been
there.
So far? Have they been good, or
they've been erratic?
Yeah,
but
you showed me a panel where Buffy had an abortion.
I did. It was very lost.jpg.
Yeah,
unfortunately. But what I did read was interesting is there was comics which were set during the TV show or pre-fall, basically. So there's the fall, which is after Sunnydale, and then there's pre-fall comics. And the guy who wrote the pre-fall comics, for the most part, for Dark Horse, there was an omnibus of these, and I was reading his introductory, his kind of editor's note, and he was saying it was an interesting exercise to do it because they actually didn't have access to Joss Whedon for the vast majority of it. And once Joss Whedon started doing season 8 of the Buffy comics and got more involved, he was more receptive to talking to them. But the guy was like, yeah, for a long time I kind of had to just interpret how this might work in comic form and how this might work between episodes. And we were really just contracted in to do this. So he's like, this is my vision of how this might work, but it wasn't really, he wasn't really allowed access to it.
What's weird about that as well is that I don't really believe in between episode fights in Buffy. I don't think that really much happened in the sense that they never ever refer to noodle incidents in Buffy.
Yeah, they never say, I remember last week when you weren't watching, we went and killed this Vajornak demon.
Exactly. The closest they ever get to is the Zeppo.
Zeppo. I was going to say the Zeppo.
I believe you.
But just the last thing I'll say on that, which I thought was very interesting in terms of, author and kind of creating this narrative, is he said the one decision he made, which was very controversial, was when he was writing comics which were set during the 7 seasons, actually the first 4 seasons of the show, he put Dawn there.
Oh, wow.
Because he made the decision that once Dawn was created, it was like a retroactive thing. And people have done that. But he said a lot of fans gave him a lot of like slack for it. But like his point was like, well, Buffy will remember her being there. And it was an interesting one.
That's an interesting idea. Like, I mean, like, I think that's an acceptable decision, but not necessarily the decision I would make.
So what I think about the comics are interesting is like they're not as good as the show by any stretch of the imagination, but it's an interesting, and I will talk about it more as we go on, because it's an interesting reflection of why did someone decide to do this. I think is why did you make that choice with this character? Why does Buffy have this gay moment with a potential Slayer, which I'll talk about in a future episode. But anyway, this is a journey I'm on.
So we watched a really interesting video the other night, which was, we should retweet actually at some point, maybe just after we release this episode, which is going to be on Wednesday. This is a Friday, it's going to be released on Wednesday because we burned through our backlog because we're bad people. So we're now flying live. This is coming to you live from our sitting room, kitchen-ish area, so deal with it. But it was basically the Buffy remasters, and just it was an extensive video about how awful they were. It was actually fascinating because I didn't know quite as much as I did before about them before watching it. So it was about how there are scenes that were color graded to be in the nighttime and suddenly are in the daytime. That amazing scene where Buffy and Angel are standing on the beach looking at a sunset. The sunset just doesn't exist anymore because they just didn't color grade the film stock. So I also found out that seasons 1 and 2 are shot in 16mm and seasons 3 forward are shot in 32mm. So 16mm is great. They shot all of Friday Night Lights in 16mm. So it's a great format. It's really grainy and cool, but it doesn't have as much information if you want to do a DVD or Blu-ray rip. So they basically, what they did was they smoothed every tiny bit of grain out, and in doing so lost all of the features of all of the actors' faces. Yeah,
this was really interesting to me because if we haven't mentioned this previously, I'm incredibly uncouth when it comes to video and photography, and Brian has educated me slowly over the years, but I didn't used to know what was putting it in a Blu-ray because I was like, oh, I can't see any difference in quality, and then you were like putting your glasses and I was like, oh, it's amazing, I'm seeing through space and time.
In fairness, you didn't have glasses at the time because you bought some and then lost them the same day.
I did that,
and then you didn't have glasses for 3 years.
That did happen. But you, dear listener, may be aware of this, may not be aware of it, but something that's very important which I'm learning, and this video was very good for that, is how you frame things, how you photograph it, how you video it, and how you color grade it, as in what color filter you apply to it, which is a simplification, I know, but anyway,
no, it's fine. Color filter is fine.
Really affects the tone of it. And the perfect example from this video and why the Buffy remasters was such a failure overall was things like, for example, in the end of season 5, The Gift, the episode where Buffy dies, the whole episode up until the end of the episode is tinted blue to indicate kind of the coldness and the futility and all that.
The nighttime, the anticipation. And
then when the sun rises and she has a moment of realization that when the dawn comes,
when it dawns on her,
when it dawns on her that she can sacrifice herself and save her sister Dawn, the color palette changes to kind of a warm orange tone, and that's a significant thing narratively. And basically the issue with the remasters was it seems like they just sent an algorithm sight and scene through all the footage and just equalized it all. So it'd be like selecting auto adjust on your Lightroom and basically allowing it to decide what should have highlights, which should have shadows, and they basically took out all the shadows and smoothed out all the highlights, and you get this like a bag Snapchat filter, basically.
And then they never went back and color graded it afterwards, which is a very important step.
And then probably the other most significant issue with it is that with two, one, they recreated some of the special effects but not others. Some of them, again, they just auto kind of like smooth them and they look really janky, but others were that they randomly cropped scenes to try and make them fit the format. So in some scenes they cut out half the information what someone's hands were doing, which might have been very significant. And in others,
Angel's latte gets cut out.
Angel's carrying a latte, and it's an important latte, and you can't see it.
I think Cordelia's giving it to him. But anyway.
Yeah. And in another scene, probably the most malign scene from the remaster, is they do a wide shot using the original footage of Faith and Buffy fighting on top of the rooftop, but in the wide shot you can see the entire camera crew and the soundstage, because it wasn't filmed to be in that wide shot and wasn't intelligently done. So this and the example Brian used of saying that there were scenes which were shot during the daytime which were meant to be color graded and adjusted to look like nighttime, but now Angel's just having a chat in her room at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Like, so this is why the good Buffy remaster doesn't exist. And I think the contrast that they made when we're watching this video is the things like, and I will come back again and say, like, the remastered versions of the original series of Star Trek, which are exceptionally done.
And TNG has great remaster.
They do a great job of basically fixing issues that were issues and realizing the vision of what they were trying to do but didn't have the technology, and otherwise not intruding on the footage. And it's really the opposite of what they did with the Buffy remaster.
The original series is an example of a format where they released the Blu-rays that is still in 4:3 ratio, which is the original ratio of Buffy, as opposed to everything likes to be released in widescreen these days. But it's like, both would be a legitimate choice. You can either release it in 4:3, keep the original framing, which is so important. Framing is important in photography and cinema, not only in practical terms, but also in terms of conveying tone, conveying importance. If you play something, rule of thirds is important. If you play something on the left-hand side of the screen, it means something. And if the character's looking out into the distance, that makes a difference rather than if they're looking inwards, etc.
Things mean things when you do them. And it's honestly one of the most important things that, I've taken away from being engaged with this stuff. I've taken away from, all that reading we did in college. Is things mean things when you do them. And bad media just says, "Oh, just put a camera fucking anywhere."
Yeah, sure. But and then, like, even if they decide to go the 16:9 route and release it in widescreen, The Wire and Charmed were both released recently, or remastered recently, in stunning quality for Blu-ray from a 4:3 stock.
Yeah.
The Wire apparently had frames where they actually digitally removed.
They painted people out of the frame.
Yeah, cameramen and stuff, because they were originally released in 4:3. Yeah, it was a great video. We'll retweet.
Yeah, we'll have to send it out, because actually it is fascinating for Buffy studies. And it's kind of heartbreaking because, like, you get the impression, like, not the impression, but they kind of talk about how there's a community of people who really tried to stoke this for years, and it took a long time to develop, and it just wasn't worth it in the end. It's very futile. But the hope, the glimmer of hope, is that if and when Buffy is rebooted, and if it's decent, and if it can be treated with the same attention as something like a Star Trek Discovery or a Sabrina has been treated, good enough that people care about it again, it could be caused to, like, re-release a better Blu-ray, or better.
And most importantly, Buffy's no longer a Fox property. It's now a Disney property.
So she's a Disney princess.
She's a Disney princess, and it's very likely that Disney would go back and look at that and say, there's money to be had here. Why haven't we released this on Blu-ray? And they'll find a way to release on Blu-ray that's not shitty, hopefully.
Absolutely.
Okay,
so Brian, that was our cold open.
Yeah, cold open.
So do you want to give us a quick summary of what happens in this episode?
Fuck. Okay, here's our Buffy summary. Spike and Drusilla arrive in Sunnydale. Buffy is obliged by Snyder to cater to parent-teacher evening, which Spike and the Anointed One's minions attack. Buffy fights them off. Snyder's hostile comments to Joyce are discounted because of Joyce's admiration for Buffy's courage. It becomes clear Snyder is part of the great Sunnydale cover-up. Spike kills the Anointed One. That is brutal. Wow.
The amount of editorializing that happens in these summaries, is fascinating.
It is. I mean, like, someone's sat down to write that and didn't really bother to just have a quick skim of the episode,
Yeah, but, like, even things like saying Snyder is part of the great Sunnydale cover-up, like, if 1,000 years from now, if most of Buffy is lost and you're reconstructing it from this text, like, that's a big decision you've made.
Yeah, you go back and you're like, if you're trying to reconstruct Buffy, you go back to season 1 and you lay foundations for the great Sunnydale cover-up. No, it's not good.
So this episode, School Hard, which Brian, you very upsettingly pointed out to me today, is actually a riff on Die Hard. I've
always read the title as being essentially like Beer Bad, School Hard, or what's that one? Power is knowledge, France is bacon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you basically pointed out to me for the first time in 30 years, I realised that, because Buffy goes up into the vents when terrorists attack the school.
Yeah.
You're 100% right. But this is a very important episode, I think, structurally for Buffy, because I think it injects quite a lot of DNA of the show. You have Joyce as we know her, Joyce with a name, which I didn't realise she wasn't named until this episode.
It's the first time that Joyce's name is mentioned. Yeah.
You have Spike, who, like him or hate him, is a very important part of the structure of the entire Buffy mythos going forward.
For sure.
You have the strong relationship between Buffy and Joyce. You actually have technically the first faux appearance of Angelus and the Angelus. Sorry, I'm going to fall into that because in this episode, Spike in his British accent calls him Angelus.
Bong.
As in I don't even know how to explain
Bong.
it. As in the culty cloister bells
Bong.
that play on Irish news whenever Christ is coming.
Yeah, at 6 p.m.
I don't really understand.
At 6 p.m. every day on RTE1, which is the most important Irish broadcaster, they do a minute of silence where they play the Angelus, which is a minute of bongs from a clock, and
from a church bell.
From church bells,
yeah.
And it's a completely Catholic thing. But they also show a bunch of people like doing things around the country and stopping and having a little moment of like thought.
Yeah, think about Christ.
Yeah, but Angelus.
But anyway, so yeah.
as opposed to saying Angelus, which is what everyone else says.
Angelus. So you see the Angelus personality, you see the death of the Anointed One in the end of the entire season arc. So structurally, it's a very important episode. I suppose just like sort of, I really enjoyed it because I wouldn't have thought I would have said this when we rewatched it, but I kind of thought about it. It's like, I really like Spike. I don't like everything he does. I don't like every one of his storylines, but there's a reason why Spike eventually becomes very
laden as a character.
Yeah, but they really kind of like wear it on their sleeve that they specifically neuter him to make him a lovable character, and he does become lovable as it goes on. That's his arc. You know, he has but even if you're coming at this from fresh perspective, you've never seen this before, there's something fascinating about him because he is, and I'll talk about this because it's my whole point about this, but he is a 21st century vampire, even though he's not starring in the 21st century.
Do you mean 20th century, Joel?
Sorry. Pardon me, we're living in the past here. 20th century vampire. He's modern. He's against the old ways. He is a bottle blonde. He was at Woodstock. He's killed 2 Slayers, which is like just a fascinating tidbit of lore. If you're like me and are like, tell me more about that, you know. Mm-hmm. He has Drusilla, who's this weird like.
I love Drusilla. Juliet Lando
followed
me on Twitter for a while, but I checked today and she's unfollowed me.
Oh, she got sick of your content.
She has like 140,000 followers and she follows about 80,000 people.
Yeah.
So I don't think she was following me for my hot takes.
But you still are in the minority of the people who follow her because she's not following you back.
Who what?
If she has 140,000 followers and she's following 80,000, then you're still in the minority. You still lost out there.
Well, yeah, what's funny is that I didn't follow her back, so, you know.
You offended Drusilla.
Probably.
Okay, so what were what's your themes here? What's the kind of things that jump at you?
Yeah, sure. So I have a couple of things. I want to talk about one really interesting line that Spike said that I'll maybe talk about in a second. For sure, the Buffy-Joyce relationship, great stuff. Fucking loved it. I'd like to talk a little bit maybe about how mean Snyder is to Buffy in this episode, how Buffy's actually just a nice kid in this episode. Yeah. I'd like to talk about Spike as kind of a quite rapey character, because he definitely is. Definitely, I think that you probably want to talk about the old versus new vampires.
Yes.
That's absolutely great. And then also just like the whirlwind as a whole notion, because it's such an interesting concept, and the whole relationship between Spike and Angel and all that stuff. Before I forget, actually, this is actually one bit that I was like, that's an interesting enough tidbit to pick up on and bring forward. But Drusilla's doll. Yeah. I can't remember her name now. Let me just... Edith. She was Marcy's doll, one of Marcy's possessions in season 1 in Out of Mind, Out of Sight.
Oh, weird.
Yeah. It's really unusual. That's all I have to say about that. There you go. Yeah, enjoy that little tidbit of information.
I didn't know that. I like when I don't know things.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm not sure I like Spike in this episode. I like Spike well enough over the show. Mm-hmm. I think he definitely has his moments. I think he's a good, well-written character. I don't know if he arrived fully formed the way that some characters can do in this show. I just felt that he was a bit much, actually. I think he lacked he could have had a couple of, lines cut. That part where he said to the guy to use your head, and then there was a really awkward couple of moments of pause, and he smashes another vampire's head through the break glass in case of emergency to get an axe. That was not only a bad joke, and it was a bad joke, but it was just like, this is one of 18 moments in this episode where they're trying to show how vicious Spike is. And it was like, just 15 or 12 would have been fine.
I will point out that, so Spike gets his nickname from the fact that he tortures people with railroad spikes. And I was like, oh, that's kind of like a nifty piece of kind of like, kind of alluding to a backstory. Until I rewatched this episode and realized at one point he actually brings out railroad spikes and starts jamming them into the ceiling to try and get Buffy. So it's a bit like...
Is that what a railroad spike is?
what else is it? Because if that's not a railroad spike, this like 2 meter long metal spike is definitely going to evoke that for me. Yeah,
absolutely, for sure. But
I presume railroad spikes are what they put between the tracks, like from one side to the other, that make it a track.
Yeah, sure. But like, aren't those quite thick?
These were quite thick. Like these were like big.
Yeah.
Baseball back size metal pokers, yeah. But it was a bit on the nose, yeah.
It's quite funny how he was called William the Bloody, and like there was 2 references to his nicknames, and one of them was William the Bloody, being that he was so vicious and touring through Europe, which actually, of course, ends not to be true. He's called William the Bloody because his poetry so bad, bloody so awful. Bloody awful, yeah.
Have you ever noticed the fact that like Angel's human name is Liam, so both their names are William?
Yeah, I have noticed that before. Yeah, it's an interesting one. Though not really.
No, but from an American perspective,
yeah,
Americans see Liam as a diminutive of William,
which is not. Liam is a Celtic name and William is a Anglo-Saxon name.
Yeah, absolutely, you're 100% right. But from the point of the writing, I think there's a connection there.
Actually, let me just look that up. I'm not sure if what Liam means. I usually do know what Irish names mean to some degree. Oh, okay, yeah. So it's a short form of the Irish name William, Uilliam. Not joking.
Oh, I was right.
Let me look further into this.
Brian's looking further into it to see if he can find a way to prove me wrong.
Okay, yeah, they have similar roots essentially, but this is Liam would be an Irish bastardization. They don't really converge, if you get me.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the other elements of this is you talked about Buffy being treated like a bad girl, and to counterpoint this, there's this character was introduced called Sheila, who is like an Alison Sheehy in the Breakfast Club kind of knockoff, kind of a bad girl who goes to like biker bars called the Fish Tank and like drinks alcohol and
leaves the bronze with 2 absolute homosexuals.
Oh yeah, just like gay porn actors on their break, don't speak a word of English, and leaves arm in arm with them, and then they summarily get killed by Spike. But
do they get killed?
I'm pretty sure they showed their boggies.
I'm not sure if they were certainly at least knocked out.
Okay, we'll see if they're in the death count, and then that would be definitive. She stabbed her horticulture teacher with some pruning shears.
Why did she even have a horticulture teacher?
Horticulture. What's that from?
That's from Drag Race.
Yeah. Horticulture.
I don't even like horticulture.
Yeah. Sure.
It's a line that, what's her name?
Jigglypuff.
Jiggly Caliente does not understand what horticulture is.
Yeah.
I watched an amazing video on YouTube one time, which was every time in Drag Race where one of the queens doesn't understand a word.
It's so good. It's exceptional.
It's really, really good.
I'll tweet that as well.
Please.
Post-apocalyptic. Yeah, so you're right. Snyder's just mean here because for one thing, he consistently prejudices Buffy because she burnt down a school building in a different school. Mm-hmm. Now, she does allude to the fact that she burnt down a building last week in this school, but he doesn't know about that.
Yeah, exactly.
So she is friendly, she's courteous, she tries her best. She might not be the most academically gifted, but she continually makes an effort, and he treats her the same as someone who is clearly being disrespectful.
The worst part for me, I mean, he's obviously an awful person, but the moment where he, instead of like acknowledging the fact that she's done an amazing job in setting up this whole parent-teacher conference and has been really good about it, where he has like basically blackmailed her into doing this on the basis of that he won't say mean things about her to her mom.
Yeah.
He then goes ahead and says mean things about her to her mom.
He does.
Like, even though it all goes well.
I don't think it's ever made textual, but he is a misogynist.
Yep.
Like he's exactly that kind of like small, petty, cowardly. He has a thing in this episode where, he's like, basically like, fuck Buffy, what will she know? I'm going to climb out this window, I'm going to send this guy out this window. Guy gets eaten by the vampire. He's like, I told him not to go out the window. He's everything that the show writes against. Just this sniveling awfulness that men can be sometimes.
Absolutely. And like, let's be real, whatever Buffy's done, or Sheila, like stabbing someone with a pruning shears,
not prune.
That's in no way worse than what I'm presumably 10% of the men do in that school.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they're the two brought together because they're women, probably.
Yeah.
That's why you're reading a bit too much into it.
Yeah, but still, it's not a great look on Snyder.
It's not, no. So, Joyce. The whole Buffy-Joyce relation in this episode is great. I loved it. Mm-hmm. I was having a little think about, so essentially what happens is that Buffy gets Giles to bring all of Joyce and a bunch of other parents out through the tunnels in the library, which is mad, but it does actually come up a couple of times.
In the
stacks.
Yeah.
what happens is that Joyce realizes that she's leaving her daughter behind. And Joyce, being a real person and a nice person, is like, I'm not leaving my daughter behind, even if she seems like she knows what she's doing, because she doesn't know that Buffy can take care of herself in this instance. She has no reason to like presume that she could, to the extent that she can. Buffy's braveness on a general basis is reflected in Joyce in this episode, but Joyce does it without the exceptional strength that Buffy has.
Yeah.
It's like it's a great little moment of just like she comes back and she whacks Spike on the head. It's really moving, actually.
Yeah.
And I think the line she says is get the hell away from my daughter.
It's good, yeah. So there's this whole thing of, I think it's very important because I think Joyce, in her limited screen time in season 1, is set up as a disapproving parent, and that's a bit of a trope, and it's necessary. And they have a complicated relationship as the show goes on, as a single mother and as Buffy being the Slayer and all that kind of stuff. But it's an important subversion, because what happens is Snyder doesn't believe Buffy. And, like, you can identify a decent person in the show if they trust Buffy's obvious good intentions. At one point when Buffy has a great moment where she confronts Snyder, where Snyder's like, who the hell do you think you are? And she's like, you will stay here until I come and get you. Do you understand what I'm saying? Listen to me, basically, And then Snyder doesn't listen to her, and Joyce is like, I'm pretty certain Buffy said stay here, and she seems to like know what she was talking about, Joyce says afterwards that she goes back, she very nearly, like, when she hit Spike in the head with that fire axe, she hadn't turned it round. Do you know what I mean? It very nearly just like chopped him in the back of the head.
Yep.
But they say, get the hell away from my daughter. Spike runs off. It's like, oh, women, all this kind of stuff. But she says, I don't know what's really going on with you, Buffy, but I know I've seen that my daughter is brave, thinks of others in a crisis, and can take care of herself. I feel a bit better now. And it's an immaculate moment. And it's great.
It's
and
lovely.
Actually, I would point out that for the remainder of this show, Spike and Joyce always have a weird friendship.
Yeah. And it might be because he respects her because of that.
I think he respects her more because of this, because it is important to say that people are strong in this show not because they have mystical strength. That helps, but the strength doesn't come from that. And Snyder makes a snide... Is that where that comes from? Makes a snide remark saying, oh, you're stubborn just like Buffy. I see where she gets that attitude from. I was like, yeah, that actually is where Buffy gets it from, that strength of just kind of like, no, I'm going to go back. And I would counterpoint that with Giles in this episode, who again is about to go out and fight the vampires, not foolishly, recklessly perhaps, but he says to Jenny, I'm responsible for it, I have to go, and he's fully prepared to do that. And it's all this theme of people who take her seriously and understand her strength, and they respond to that, and it's really good in that respect.
I totally agree. It's it is good in that aspect. I do think that the episode was a little short on great Giles and Willow moments, actually, a little bit. Though Willow at the end of the episode, where she's still stuck in the closet with Cordelia, pretty great. Yeah,
so very much like maintaining this closet kind of metaphor with Willow. And actually, this is the first episode that Cordelia is in without pretext.
Yeah, she's sitting there helping everyone whittle the stakes.
Yeah, exactly. And there's no like, oh, I'm here because this thing happened to me. It's just like I'm hanging out being a Scooby in the Scooby gang. Yeah,
it was nice. Yeah,
it's nice. Yeah,
no, I agree. I picked up on that too. It was nice. The line that I wanted to talk about was Spike says to Drusilla, "I'll chop her into messes." That's a line from Othello.
Really?
Yeah, I think Othello says it to Iago, or I chop him into messes.
The parrot.
The parrot, indeed. So I haven't read Othello. I haven't seen Othello, but Othello is about a man called Iago. He's basically the main character. He has most lines, who manipulates Othello, who is a sort of kingly kind of character, into thinking that his wife Desdemona is cheating on him, when she's not, and he ends up killing Desdemona and then killing himself and Iago. It's a tragedy. Everyone fucking dies. But I'm not sure what the implications are here because I haven't read the text. But it was pretty great. It was a little interesting little tidbit that I read about. What are we taking here? Is Othello potentially Angel? Is Iago Angelus? Desdemona being Buffy in this instance, of course. But yeah, it was an interesting little small another Shakespeare reference that Joss Whedon really does love to litter through the show.
He just kind of weaves them in a little bit, yeah.
He does. It was a really nice one as well, I thought. I'm going to read Othello this week, actually, and I'll report back on what I discover. You know what I love about reading plays?
You can just do it.
Plays only take as long to read as they do to perform. So if you sit down for 3 hours, you can read almost every play that exists, except for Angels in America.
It's handy.
Yeah, that was kind of all I had to say about that. I don't really, maybe someone can, I don't know, send us an email, tell us what Othello's about.
Yeah.
Email us to what is Othello about at buffyboys.com, please.
I'll rush off and set up that address.
Please do.
So something you mentioned earlier was about the whirlwind, and what the whirlwind is basically this kind of retconned, kind of retroactively built concept that during the 1800s,
late 1800s,
late
I'd say,
1800s, early 1900s.
Because we know by we know by about 1900 that Drusilla and Spike were splintered off by themselves, and Angel had the soul by that point, I think.
Yeah, so basically it was really a part of the Master's Coven, part of the Order of Aurelius. Darla had sired Angel, who sired Drusilla, who sired Spike. And during this period, they tore through Western Europe, essentially. And you see a lot of material as you go on. They kind of got back references this.
Mainly an Angel, I think, to be honest.
A lot more Angel, definitely. But whenever you see, for example, like in Spike in this episode, it kind of misdirectionally implies that Angel is his sire in the sense that everyone higher in the vampire line,
which I believe that Joss Whedon has said is not a mistake, that it was essentially if someone's your grandsire, they're essentially your sire as well.
Yeah, and I believe that because that is fairly consistent. It makes sense to me. But yeah, you have this sense that of pulling together these threads of these different vampires into some kind of cohesive narrative, and how they're kind of portrayed differently, and each one of them is kind of a very different kind of vampire. And a lot of what Spike is about is, Spike is really the only one of the four of them that, his human self is very artistic, as his kind of like creativity and kind of disruptive, etc. And what bringing Spike into the show does is creates this conflict between the old vampire, the old world vampire, whom every vampire really has been up until this point. You have the Order of Aurelius, very much hanging a lampshade on it with this episode with the Anointed One and the Feast of St. Vitus. We must wait for Saturday, the dead will rise, cleanse us, all this kind of stuff. And Spike very specifically comes along, doesn't wait for Saturday, says, I got bored and I'm just going to go kill you anyway. And it's introducing this concept of a more modern vampire who can just kind of be dangerous because he's quippy, because he, spoilers, but kills the Anointed One at the end of the episode, just gets frustrated with him and burns him up. The annoying one. And can just kind of like write against the tropes in the same way that Spike says Buffy's dangerous because he says a slayer with friends and family that wasn't in the guidebook, So they're kind of competing forces of this kind of modernity and this kind of reinvention in a really interesting way. And he actually very specifically alludes to it when Angel pretends to be Angelus and says, I gave Buffy my torture puppy dog routine and she fell for it. And Spike says, are they still believing that Anne Rice routine?
Yeah, it was great.
As an interview with a vampire. It's like, yeah, that's exactly what this is saying. It's like vampires are monsters and animals. They're not romantic as much as they try to portray themselves as being.
Though Spike, of course, is probably the most romantic vampire that we ever see in this show.
Well, with a capital R, as in a romantic poet, yeah.
No, I mean romantic.
In both senses, but I think
he falls in love with Buffy when he doesn't have a soul yet. He loves Drusilla quite a lot. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like, what is love for vampires? I've seen a lot of discussions online about what does love mean for a vampire. Mm-hmm. I don't give a shit. I don't think it's important.
He's very Byron-esque in some ways.
Oh, Byron-esque is a good one. That's it's true. But I remember, so when you said Angel was doing his puppy dog routine, or that's what Spike says, that reminded me of the season 3, The Wish. I can't believe we're going to go on with this charade. I just lost 3 minutes. We were doing
so well.
I just lost 3 minutes of recording by accident, and Joe's being very nice and pretending like he's not hearing this for the first time.
No, we're going to be funny again.
Okay, funny again.
So what you were telling me about actually, let's do the other side of the conversation. I'll make a novel.
Okay, go on.
So what that reminded me of was in The Wish.
In season 3?
Yes, exactly. The one where, what was that episode about again?
Where Cordelia wishes Buffy away and creates an alternate timeline where Willow is gay.
Yeah, that wasn't the whole point of it. But Angel does do, Willow calls him the puppy when...
So essentially what happens is that Willow at one point says that she wants to go play with the puppy, and it's basically that they have Angel in a room where sunlight keeps creeping in and burning him.
Oh, I forgot about that, actually.
Yeah, and they go there to torture him with fucking holy water and crosses and stuff.
But in fairness, Angel, he very much does do that puppy dog face. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Whenever he's feeling forlorn and he just looks... You know that face?
Yeah, Joel just did his impression of a puppy dog face, which is really... truly awful.
Haunting, I think.
Yeah, it basically looks like Edward Monk's The Scream. So, what was I say about that? Oh, by the way, this is the first time we've seen a vampire get killed by sunlight.
Oh, so it is. Yeah. It's really
good. We didn't quite see it. Apparently, the first time it actually properly happens is a couple episodes down the road.
Well, in fairness, it's probably only so much you can immolate a child on TV.
Oh, speaking of the Anointed, apparently the reason that he's sitting down in this episode and the reason he gets killed is that he had a growth spurt over the summer between the two seasons, and they were like, we can't. He's supposed to be a forever child. Yeah, we can't keep him in.
So I mentioned that I had read an AMA that he did on Reddit recently about basically his time on the show, and it's just super positive. He's just like, we didn't think it was going to be a big thing. We were filming out of a rundown office block in like Western California and sound stages and stuff, so I wasn't concerned about whether or not my character was going to get a big storyline. He's like, I was just happy to have work, and he's like, I never really met any of the cast. Like 95 my scenes were with the master, 95% of them. Everyone else I met Nicholas, Brandon and Sarah a couple of times, and they were all professionals and very kind, and it was just really positive. He said that his favorite souvenir from the show was his fangs, which he never got to show on the show.
Oh no!
But they had intended for him to vamp out at one point, and that he's showing it to his dog, or he's like, oh look, there's Daddy, and he was like, it was just really nice. And he says that everyone's been really kind to him over the years, like just like, oh, you're part of this, and that the Anointed One had a lot of potential as a big bag and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but it was just super positive.
That's lovely.
What did you think about Spike referring to Angel as an Uncle Tom?
Yeah, that was a bit awkward. All right,
What is an Uncle Tom?
An Uncle Tom is a trope from the novel Uncle Tom's Cabin, which has been made into many a movie. My grandmother loves that book, but it's essentially a black person who makes it acceptable for white people to become ingratiated with black culture, and a way in for them to feel okay about being casual about the fact that, especially white people in America in the South in the 50s and whatnot, but they feel comfortable being casual about the fact that they come from an incredibly racist society.
There's an aspect of, I think, betrayal to a term, or of someone who has collude with the oppressor, that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. It always hits my brain as being a similar novel to
I know exactly maybe I don't know what you're going to say.
Oh, Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry?
Oh, that's not what I was going to say.
It's a really great novel about a family in Southern America in the 30s or 50s, and there's a scene where they think that someone's going to get lynched from their family. And I remember reading it when I was maybe 13 and being fucking terrified, and just thinking like, this is a person, this is many people who were just sitting there in their house terrified. Oof, really, really affected me.
What was that book that was on the Leaving Cert course that was Uncle something?
Oh, you mean Good Night, Mr. Tom?
Yeah, that's it.
That's the one I love. That's Junior Cert A, because it's for kids. But
pretty certain I was on my Leaving Cert course.
I doubt it.
Maybe not. But like, it was quite dark at the end.
It's a really dark book. It's dark throughout.
That's who I always think they're talking about.
Yeah.
Like my brain initially, when you say Uncle Tom, I hear Mr. Tom, and then I need to course correct a little bit.
Mr. Tom was also recorded by the guy who played Inspector Norse.
Written by or recorded by?
No, sorry, he was played by the guy who played Inspector Norse. What was his name again? Anyway, the guy who played Inspector Norse for years, the TV version of Good Night, Mr. Tom. It was great. It was really nice. I really like that book. It's really dark. There's a dead baby.
There is a dead baby. Inappropriate term for two white vampires to say to each other.
I would agree. Yeah.
What's the general takeaway there?
Yeah, and then we have to discuss what the fuck was Angel doing there.
Yeah, something like I've often wondered, like, what was his plan? Because basically he comes in, the idea is he's going to present Xander as a morsel, a tasty tidbit, and he's going to pretend to be Angelus. And in fairness, that is actually the first time we see the Angelus personality, and it is accurate. Like, he does do that. And like, Dave Boreanaz is always sinister. He's always really sinister as Angelus, and it's good foreshadowing, I think. But his plan is like, hey, come bite Xander, and when he doesn't bite him, like, the plan falls apart. But I've always wondered what that plan was. And in fairness, he does say specifically his anger at the end of the episode that his plan was, if he bit you, I'd know that he bought it. But that's it, really. Yeah, it's a terrible plan. It reeks terrible.
It's not good foresight from him. Should we wrap up?
Buffy Bits. I have Buffy Bits. I definitely want to talk
Buffy Bits is part of the wrap up, I think.
Okay.
I'd love to hear Buffy Bits, Joel.
This is Buffy. This is fecund.
All I want is the bits.
Oh, just the bits. What do I want to say interesting about this? So one is interesting, relative term. You know what I always think of when I say I'm going to say something interesting on this podcast is a friend of ours, Paul. While we play Dungeons and Dragons, whenever Morgan was one of my non-player characters that started talking, he said, tell me anything about yourself, but only if it's interesting or worth knowing. I was like, shit, it's what I'm about to say, interesting or worth knowing.
Yeah.
So Juliet Lando, who plays Drusilla and who used to follow you on Twitter, was also extensively in Doctor Who audios. She played the third incarnation of Romana, who was the most famous female.
The fourth Doctor's wife.
Yeah, the fourth Doctor's wife in real life, yeah.
Definitely. Oh, also in the show, right?
No, not in the show.
Oh, sorry, she's just another...
They had tension, certainly.
Okay. Apparently, when she was asked at one point who the greatest monster she ever experienced in Doctor Who was, She said Tom Baker.
Yeah, Tom Baker. Yeah, that's a great line. Tom Baker was apparently a tyrant and a very difficult man to marry and live with. There's the fact that Snyder is clearly aware there are vampires in Sunnydale. As we said, the Great Sunnydale kind of conspiracy.
PCP gangs.
Getting
named for the first time in this episode.
I refer to that so often. There's retroactively, we find out later on that the most recent Slayer that Spike killed was Nikki Woods, whose son becomes a character on the show, and that's who he gets his duster from.
It is.
So that's, I always thought that was interesting, kind of this, like, you know, something I think when the reboot comes, we'll have a look at the two of the other really well established Slayers have both been black women.
You mean Kendra and
Nikki?
Yeah, sure.
Which I think is interesting, you know.
What's interesting about Nikki is that she's not well established. She's well established in memory, if you get me. She's only in one scene.
Yeah, but it returns to narratively important, and there's actually quite few Slayers defined on the show.
Agreed,
you know, because if this was supernatural, it'd be every second episode we like look at this one that exists in, I don't know, like World War II or whatever, that kind of thing.
This is supernatural would be on season 28 of this.
That's finally finishing, actually.
It is finishing this season, isn't it? Yeah, nice. I can't believe you watched like 9 seasons of that.
Watched 5 seasons. 5 seasons were pretty decent. There's a scene where Xander goes through Buffy's handbag with a John D soundtrack to try and find a stake, and he pulls out the yo-yo she was playing with in the last episode and rummages around and pulls out, with, to his great horror, a tampon.
Yeah, and drops it immediately.
And drops it like, as I think the stage directions actually specifically refer to it as, drops it like a red hot tampon. Which is very good.
One of the great scenes in this episode was where Willow and Buffy are trying the punch the lemonade that Buffy has made. And Buffy said, yeah, I squeezed all the lemons myself. And Willow's like, how much sugar did you put in it? And Buffy's like, sugar?
Yeah, disgusting. It's a great farce episode. Yeah, so, and otherwise, in terms of the death count, it's pretty high in this episode. There is a vampire called Big Ugly that Buffy stakes outside the bronze. Dwayne and Dell, the gay porn stars, are apparently killed by Spike, according to the wiki, which I take as canonical. So that girl,
Sheila,
doesn't
die.
Sorry by Drusilla.
She's one of the 4. I read this as well. She's one of the 4 remaining people sired by the Master, right?
Not what I was going to say.
Oh, sorry.
Her surname's Martini.
Yeah, no, I knew that.
According to the script, yeah.
No, apparently she's one of the only people alive still because she doesn't die in this episode and she never returns. Mm-hmm. So she's one of the only surviving people who were sired by the Master.
Yeah.
Or sorry, Master's lineage.
Yeah, there's quite a lot in the comics about like why the Master's lineage is so important, which we'll come back to.
Cool. Well, that's not.
No, I will though. One of the parents, Brian Kirsch, which was killed by Spike, and two unidentified vampires, one unidentified parent, and the anointed one was burnt to death as well.
Sure was. What did you think of the fashion in the episode?
Fashion was decent. It was very badly lit once again, like season one. It was surprisingly badly lit.
Yeah.
And I remember it as being badly lit. I think I said to you there's a bit of discontinuity in that the vampires easily entered the school, whereas later in the season they make a point of the fact that Angelus was able to enter the school and how that was, not that it was unusual, but it was unexpected.
Yeah.
Which I think is very odd. He doesn't do a lot. Like, he doesn't do a lot before he leaves the show, ultimately. Like, he just sees he's a presence.
He sure is.
Xander wears a, again, big baggy shirt at one point.
Shockingly blue.
Looks like a tablecloth.
Willow's wearing a really nice black sad dungarees.
She is, but she's wearing like Looney Tunes pattern shirt underneath it.
Though at another point she does wear a Scooby-Doo t-shirt.
She does.
Which is a recurring theme, apparently.
Maybe she just knows she's in the Scooby Gang now.
Maybe.
Buffy wearing big pajamas at one point that have flower pot watering cans on them.
Yeah.
Just like not good.
No. Joyce's hair looks great in the episode.
Yeah, bouffant. She knows how to moisturize. You know, she's just a picture of like assertive womanhood.
I was really happy when Cordelia acknowledged how wonderful Joyce was.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm looking at the Wikipedia here. I'm trying to decide what the name of this episode is going to be from the international titles.
I already know.
Is it parent?
We've never said that on the podcast, but the titles of the episodes are always the international titles from the episodes.
Yeah, the translations.
No, they are, and I get to choose them because I do the editing of the episode.
Do.
But I have 100% chosen Parent-Teacher Conference with Obstacles.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's definitely the best one. That's the German translation, which is Eltern Abend mit Hindernissen. But the other ones, the School of Tough School, Terror School, Attacking Sunnydale. Like, they're all great.
They're all pretty good.
Yeah.
All right, do we want to do our rating?
Yeah, sure. Let's write that down. So
I've written down. Yeah.
Okay.
I have two different ones. I'm really torn between what I'm going to go for.
Do you want to go first? Will I?
I'll go first.
Okay.
I'm going to go for 7.5 messes out of 10.
Okay.
Yeah. I thought it was a good, fun episode. I don't think Spike was as realized as he could have been. It moved quickly. It was well written. The dialogue was great. The engagement was really good fun.
Okay, I'm going to go for 8.3 Red Hot Tampons.
Wow, okay.
I thought it was a good episode. I think it had good energy. It had really strong mythos. It was uneven in places, but just it felt like Buffy. I felt like I'm watching an episode of Buffy. And I think that what it introduced, the sheer amount of content to introduce into the mythos, is deserving of note, you know?
Totally agree. The other thing I was going to say was extraneous lunar cycles.
Yes, that was an odd comment.
There was an odd comment. But Giles says it to Jenny Calendar when they're like talking about what might be happening on this Saturday and how the ancient something didn't account for the Mesopotamian calendar.
Mesopotamian calendar wasn't adjusted after Roman Greco, but etc.
Yeah, like extraneous lunar cycles
doesn't mean anything.
It doesn't mean anything, but also I think lunar cycles they're just the right amount of them.
Yeah, they're neither too many or too few. I was just thinking you have an entire episode talking about the fact that this is the Feast of St. Vitus. So this whole Catholicism thing. At one point you can hear people upstairs, just in the background, just in the subtitles, doing that kind of Catholic like drone singing thing where it's like...
That's more Protestant, I think, to be honest.
No, like people sing out of tune in Catholic church all the time.
That's true, actually.
Yeah, it's like, dear St. Vitus, you have murdered so many people. Like that is literally one of the lines that they sung, and I was like, oh my god.
It was pretty great.
No wonder your parents didn't want you watching this when you were younger.
This is one of the ones that, I don't know, they're very confusing. I'm so happy because there was a small possibility that my parents would be arriving while we were recording this. And I said, listen, you can just sit in the background or you can be a guest in the podcast. And my mom was like...
You did not tell me about this.
Mom was like, oh, you can tell me some interesting things to say. And I was like, no, I won't. But they're not here, thank fuck.
No, tell her some interesting things to say. You have to come up with some first and then have some left over, so...
That's true. Maybe you should start a podcast. Okay, so thanks everyone for listening. That's really good of you for listening to the whole thing. If you listened to it, did you listen to it? I don't know. Maybe you did.
We have statistics. We've cold hard stacks that people are listening on a consistent basis. So that's a fact. Take that away, put that in the bank. So I'm going to wrap up for us now. I
was going to do it. I like taking it away from you because I have no idea where it's going to go. Quick one.
Halfway through this, I might throw it over to you. So say thanks very much for listening. Once again, we really appreciate if you could follow us on Twitter, if you could send us your thoughts on the episode, if there's anything you're looking forward to. Maybe this has inspired you to come back to Buffy after a long period of time. Maybe you've never watched Buffy before. A couple of people have said that to me, and that's pretty exciting. My call to action with this episode will be, if you have a podcast that you do and you would like one of us to be a guest on it, let me know. And the reason why I'm asking this is because I asked a friend of mine what was a good way to promote your podcast, and he said that was one of the best things to do. So I will go to you. I will be on your podcast. I'm charming. I'm much nicer when Brian isn't around. So yeah, if you have a podcast, we'll be happy.
Here are the things that I will do podcasts about: dogs, t-shirts,
cats, Sekiro,
and James Joyce. I will do no other podcasts. I'm sorry.
Or a podcast that only has all of those things on it.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, if you have a podcast, hit us up. I will go on it. I will do that. I've committed to this now. Okay, so thanks so much for listening. Cheers. See you next week watching... What's the next episode, Brian?
Fuck, I didn't look it up. I don't know. Inca Mummy Girl.
Okay, so thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time. We're watching Inca Mummy Girl, which is the episode with, and you'll be surprised to hear this, the Inca Mummy Girl. Okay, over to you, Brian. Take it away.
Take what, where?
Take the episode home.
Buffy Boys. See yous. Bye.